in. But somebody recommended some guy by the name of Mike Thomas to come speak here. I can't remember whether it was in the lectures or whether it was at a meeting. But Mike was preaching in Owensboro, Kentucky, then, I believe. And after a while, he moved down to Beaver Dam, Kentucky. He was down there till just recently. Now he's become a Hoosier. You have to start rooting for IU, or you've got two or three other choices, Notre Dame or Purdue. You can take your pick, but you got to root for one of them. Butler would be good too. But it's really good that he's preaching up in Kokomo now, and it's been good to know him and know of him. And it's good to have him here back with us. Mike, come speak with us.
Thank you, Brother Welch. It's a supreme honor to be here and to be asked to come and lend a little support to this great effort being put forth. I don't know if this makes a difference based on what you said, but I still have my Kentucky's driver's license. I don't know if I could be up here doing this if I'm a Hoosier. I'm hoping to be a Hoosier in a couple of weeks when I get my license transferred. Is that? Well, okay, I'll run. I don't care. I will run. But we're very honored to be in this area, and it's all new to me as far as Indianapolis, and that's one thing my wife and I are looking forward to is getting to know a new set of brethren. We have been in that area of Kentucky for 22 years, roughly, from the same vicinity. We got to know a lot of people, lifelong friends. I'm hoping we can have the same experiences, similar experiences here, and that has already seemed to be off to a good start. This lectureship and getting to know some of you, and so I'm grateful to be here. We're grateful to be here, my wife and I. We have one of our children with us, and there are some brethren from Kokomo who've come down. That means a lot to come and support this effort. But I have a few thoughts that I'd like to share. I mean, really, after what Brother Curry just said, I would love to change this to what I preached on Sunday morning about the Christian's hope, because that is just hearing what and the faith that's found there is tremendous. But I will stay the course, and I will go with what I had planned, and that is a text from Ecclesiastes where the writer is defined himself as the preacher, and he is looking at life to see what profit there is, what thing of value or substance can be found in this world. And after examining life with his abilities and resources and his insight, he was forced to reach a conclusion that it's all empty and it's all vain and it's all futile. And you know this in reading Ecclesiastes, how he repeats this over and over and over, that it's all vain. And he says in verse 2 of Ecclesiastes chapter 1, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. And he goes on to say in verse 12 that I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven, this burdensome task God has given to the sons of men by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. That his pursuit, of course, is to try and find something of lasting value in this world. That if a man is going, or if a person is going to set out into this world and try and find something that it will make them full, will make them complete, and have substance to it. That if a person is going to test everything in life or under the sun can he find or she find that can be said, okay, this is worth it all? That if I invest my soul in this, my life in this, I will finally have something that is meaningful, that makes me whole, makes me complete. And what this man is saying is that if you're trying to look at things in this world, and you're trying to discover things in this world, especially apart from God, in finding completeness, then you're in for a rude awakening. That you're going to be supremely disappointed. Because what I can find, he says, is that that is a vain pursuit. It is as if you are trying to fill a bucket with holes in it. That the more you try and the more effort you put forth, your results are the same. That you're in the same condition you started out with. And that is you are lacking and you are incomplete and you are still pursuing something else, still wanting something else. And so that's what he wants us to realize, is that whenever we try to fill our soul with things of a material world to try and find completeness, we're just going to be disappointed. And I love how he uses not only the phrase vanity of vanities, he uses this phrase of grasping for the wind. We read that even in I believe it's in verse 14. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. And he goes through the book and he repeats that phrase, grasping for the wind. And that is a tremendous way of looking at it. What does that mean? I mean, can you think of a better way of illustrating this, of trying to find something of meaning than trying to grab a handful of air? I mean, look at your hand. Empty your hand right now and look at it. Okay? You have an empty hand. Now close it. What's in your hand? Nothing. Whatever is in your hand is exactly what you started out with. There's nothing to it. You cannot grab air. You cannot tie down air. There's nothing to it. And so he's pointing out that that's what life is. That if I'm going to go through life and I'm going to try and find something that makes me whole and complete, and I can say that this will finally make me satisfied, looking at just, not going above this, but just under the sun. It's all empty. That there is nothing to be gained, and there is nothing of lasting value. And there are several reasons for this. One, he points out that the earth has the inability, the things of this life are incapable of making us whole and making us complete. And he began testing everything. I mean, he began looking at everything that could somehow give him value. And he says in chapter 2, he says, come now, in verse 1. He said in my heart, come now, I will therefore enjoy pleasure, but surely this also is vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. I made my works great. I built myself houses and planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. And he keeps on talking about how he became great and excelled, and he had everything. He had more than anybody else before him, and from what we can tell, anyone after him. I was great, he says in verse 9. Verse 10, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. In verse 12, then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who succeeds the king? Only what he has already done. And so he says, look, okay, If you think you can somehow find a different experience and outcome than I have, you're misled, because you cannot test this life any greater than I have. And he says, I went through everything, and from what I found out is that it's just not there. And if you want to go down the list, okay, what can make me happy? What can make me whole? Well, what if I was entertained all day? What if I was given to pleasure all day long and was allowed to feel good all day long? He says, look, I did that. I tested that. It's not there. If you think somehow if you can be entertained all day, that somehow you can be separated from the problems of life and enjoying the day all day, it's not there. You cannot find lasting satisfaction in trying to be entertained all day long. I said of mirth that it is folly, is what he says. What does it accomplish? And we really don't need him to tell us that. I mean, we can see just from observing, right? Even people who define entertainment, even people who define comedy or laughter or things of that nature, even they show us it's not there. I mean, you can just go down the list of entertainers who have reached the wrong conclusions in life, who ended their life prematurely because they were incomplete. And it's always happened. I mean, it doesn't take long till you hear this in the news of some celebrity who has taken their life or ended their life prematurely. A very sad outcome. But that shows us that, okay, if I just give myself to laughter all day, I'll finally be helped. No. Solomon says you're going to be misled. You're going down a path that will only disappoint you. And he talks about not only that pursuit, but the pursuit of building things and accomplishing things. And let me tell you, friends, this guy could do it. The Bible talks about how even rulers throughout the world would come and hear what this man had to say, because he was answering every question. There was nothing that you posed before him that he could not answer. And he was a man who had great wealth, who had great fame. The guy had the complete package. In fact, he had more of a complete package than you'll ever have, and than I'll ever have. He had excess. He had success. He had excellence all throughout his life. And this was evident in what is briefly said about him regarding his assets. It talks about in 1 Kings chapter 10, in verse 14, how he had 666 talents of gold brought in annually. And that's just one source of his revenue, or at least one source of his riches. Now, I don't know, I read somewhere that this was roughly $300 million a year. But that's, I mean, you look at that. I saw somewhere where it was stated that Bill Gates has 70-something billion dollars. And in order to spend that much money, you would have to spend $1 million a day for 214 years or something like that. Something crazy. $1 million a day. $1 million a day. A lot of money. Well, Solomon was right there. I mean, if you're bringing in $300 million a year, if this is true, and you have all the other stuff that goes with it, $1 million a day. I mean, this guy had resources that were unlimited. This guy did not have to worry about the lights going off. He didn't have to worry about making the next bill. Not even part of his understanding. And that's all he ever knew was occupancy. And he says, look, I tested all this stuff. I had resources you'll never have at my level. And I built stuff. He said, I built myself houses. Now, we're renting a house. We're still trying to get one house. We're still trying to find that one house for us to move into. This guy had houses. And you know, these weren't little rinky-dink houses like we live in, or I live in at the moment. This guy had mansions upon mansions. He had vineyards. You know, have you ever gone down to the Billboard and toured that? It's amazing. It really is just how advanced this guy, the Vanderbilt family, was at that time, because they had so many luxuries that you and I take for granted nowadays, but this was all unheard of back then. And the tour, it's a beautiful house, but the tour is basically the house and the vineyards, or the house and the fields. I mean, that's basically what the tour is all about, and the opulence that was associated with that family at that time. Solomon says, "Look, I had this house after house after house, vineyard after vineyard. I built stuff. I accomplished things. I had gold coming in all the time, all throughout the world. I had all this stuff coming in." And he was living well. I mean, if you look at luxury, and you look at royalty, and you see things like this, and I'm sure that he had houses very similar to this that were given to greatness and excess. And this is evident even today by these types of standards. And his point is, how can you possibly outmatch me? I have more resources than you'll ever have. And I tested everything. And his point was, the best you can do is what I've done. He says in verse 12 that what can a man do who succeeds the king? Only what has already been done. And so he said, look, I've gone there. I've gone through everything that we think about, everything we want, everything we desire, everything we assume that will make us whole. I tested it all. You know, he even said he had servants. You know, you might think, well, maybe that's it, right? If I have somebody serving me all day long, that I ring a bell, they come, and it doesn't work. I tried that with my wife. I tried giving a bell, and I said, Steph, I want this. Well, get up and get it, then. That's the response I get in my household. Well, Solomon, servants. And he said, I had servants born in my house. They had generations of servants before him. He had abundance all around. And here's his conclusion. It's not there. That he says, I looked on all the works that my hands had done and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. And you might say, well, Solomon, if you had just a few more million, if you had just one more house, if you had just a few more vineyards, if you had just a couple of more dozen servants praising your name, ready to serve you all that you wanted, then you'd finally find something that is lasting. And he'd laugh. And he had a right to laugh, because that's comical to think that somehow I'm lacking something in testing this thing called life. Man was with resources unlimited. And his conclusion is, you can't do it. You cannot find anything in this world to make you whole. And his other point in making the conclusion that it's grasping for wind is, number two, you have to leave it all behind. You know, even as God's people, this is good to know. You know, hopefully we find peace and joy and happiness. We're supposed to. And we learn how to live a good life. We're supposed to. But even if we have a good stride going, a good rhythm going in life, guess what? We still have to leave this one. And we have to leave everything behind. And so that's another point he makes, is that this is why you don't need to invest your life in this world, because it's all going to be left behind. He talks about this struggle in verse 15 of chapter 2. I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? And I said in my heart, this also is vanity. Well, how big is the hole for the casket of a wise person? It has its dimensions. Okay, well, how big is the hole for the casket of a fool? Very same dimension. It doesn't matter if you're wise or foolish. You're both going to leave. And so that's the struggle he had in looking at this life, in trying to say, well, this is my all. And the reason this is so vain is because we all leave this world alike. And he even goes to the point of comparing ourselves to animals. In making this observation, in looking at all of life, and he says in verse 19 of chapter 3, what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them. As one dies, so the other dies. Surely they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over animals, for all is vanity. Of course, he's not saying that, he's not speaking of morality, he's not speaking of spirituality, he's not talking about things like that. He's talking about breath. And when it comes to breath, you're no different than an animal. You're going to die. And not only are you going to die, you're going to leave everything in this world behind. And so you shouldn't be a person who thinks, well, I'm going to invest my soul in these things and finally be whole. No, you can't. They don't satisfy a spiritual being, for one thing. But number two, you can't hold on to this stuff. You have to leave it all behind. And that's the observation, of course, that Paul makes in 1 Timothy chapter 6. We brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. We're told, there are two things that are certain, right? Death and taxes. Well, according to Paul, there's at least one more. And it is certain, he says, you're not taking anything out. That you brought nothing into this world. How many car keys did you bring? How many pieces of jewelry did you bring? How many deeds of land did you bring with you? And we all know we came into this world naked and we came empty-handed. And Paul says that's exactly how you're leaving. You brought nothing here and you don't get to take anything out. Everything you gain in this life, it stays here while you go back or while you leave. And so why would you make this your God? It's funny how things happen where like Jeff said, thinking about the Word of God, and how there are things that can happen where we do think about it. I recall a few years ago, I was in Texas visiting for the funeral of a friend, an older man who was a good man, a man of God, who served as an elder for many years. But he was a very successful farmer, and he had a lot of resources and assets. He owned a lot of land in Texas, and he was a very generous man. He would give to people all the time. And nice house, several houses, but when I went to go and stay with the family to go to his funeral, I was staying in the apartment at one of the main houses. It was this apartment, nice apartment. And here I am sitting the next day, waiting to go to the funeral home for the service. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just looking around. This guy had so much nice things. And stuff like this just flooded my soul. That man didn't take anything with him. He didn't take anything. Everything he gained in life, all that money, all that land, all that property, all those, he will never touch those things again. He'll never see those things again. That all stayed here, and he's gone, and those things are separated from him forever. That's what Solomon's saying. Why would you live for this world? Why would you make things your world? Why would you make accolades your world? Why would you make these your God? Why? Because you have to leave, and these things stay here. So what's the point of it all? It's like trying to grab for wind. And not only do you leave it all behind, you have to leave it to other people who don't deserve it, is what Solomon said. In chapter 2, he goes back and he says, the real struggle is that I had to apply myself, right, to acquire these things. I had to have wisdom and skill and knowledge and strength and diligence and application to make an increase. And yet I leave it to people who did not bear the same burden and exert the same struggle to collect these things. And he says that's unfair, I guess, yes. But that's just, it's futile. It's vain. He says in verse 18 of chapter 2, I hated all my labor, in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he'll be a wise or a fool, yet he will rule over all my labor, in which I have toiled and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. You know, my farmer friend was a wise man. He did learn. He wasn't born into that. He learned how to make that stuff. He applied himself. But that land's being hunted by somebody else right now. Those cars are being driven by somebody else right now. Those clothes are being worn by somebody else right now who did not apply themselves with as much diligence as he did in acquiring those things. And that's the struggle Solomon is looking at. So, the conclusion is what then? Well, the conclusion is not, well, okay, so maybe I shouldn't work. What's the point of working if I can't hold on to it anyway? Well, 1 Thessalonians even gets into that. That's not the way God wants us to interpret this dilemma. And even Solomon's saying that's not the right conclusion. The right conclusion is not to say, well, I won't apply myself for anything. No, you're missing out on life when you live like that, because wisdom excels folly, is what he says. That if you want to live a good and meaningful life, you need to apply yourself to work and diligence and goals and ambition and accomplishing things. That's a God-given task and privilege he's given you. So it's not the right interpretation to say, well, I'm just not going to do anything. No, you'll still be lacking even more, especially when it comes to wisdom. In fact, he says all throughout the book, nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. It is a God-given privilege, friend, to be able to choose, yes, to be able to change, yes, but to be able to pursue things and apply ourselves and exert ourselves to accomplish good things in life, to climb that mountain, to overcome that struggle, to apply ourselves to live a better level of life. That's a blessing from God. And Solomon's saying if you really want to find what happiness is all about, it is exerting yourself to accomplish these things, especially with God. He goes on to say in verse 12 of chapter 5, the sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep. So it is good to work. It is good to apply ourselves. It's good. That's a gift. But don't make this world your God. That's his point. Live your life with wisdom, but don't live for this world. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity. And that's just true. Anybody who loves material things, it's trying to pour water into a bucket with holes. There's nothing there. You're not going to find substance. Thinking, okay, if I can just make a few more bucks, I'll finally be happy. No, you won't. It's not about that. It goes on to say that why should you set your heart on things that you can't hold on to? Proverbs 23 says in verses 4 and 5, do not overwork to be rich because of your own understanding. See, will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven. And that's just the case. So we can't hold on to it. But again, we need to be reminded it just will not satisfy who we are. Came across this quote years ago. I don't know if it's still the case. I really haven't had the interest in researching to see if anything has changed on this. But years ago, Billy Ray Cyrus said of his daughter Miley, and this is years ago when she was doing well. I think it said, well, even here it says she was worth $1 billion at that point. I don't know if she's still worth that much. But he was making that observation about how she was worth $1 billion at that time. And he said that if he could do it all over, he would have stayed in Tennessee. He would not have pursued that path. That put his daughter on that path to great fame, great fortune. But I'd erase it all if I could. Now, these are people that have found a lot of money in life. And this man is saying, this stuff will not make you whole. And if I could do it all over again, I would rather do without this stuff. I don't know if he still thinks that way, but at least in this interview and at this point, that was his observation. And that's what Solomon's saying. You and I will not reach any other different conclusion if we make this world our God. Another reason why trying to fill our spiritual values with material things of this world, or even this life in general, is like grasping for wind, is because, number 3, we're all going to be forgotten. He says this in chapter 2 in verse 16, that there is no more remembrance of the wise and of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool. This is in agreement with how he starts out the book. Remember where he said that, why is it all vain? Well, it's vain because one generation comes and another generation, one generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. And the point he's making is that you and I are unable to stop the world from turning when we leave. This world was spinning when we got here. This world will still be spinning when we leave. That life does not revolve around us. That we might think, and I think that's what he's building on, we think, well, it's all about me. It all started with me. I'm the first person to experience this, and I'm unique. And he's saying, no, you're not. You're part of a long list of people who have done this, and you're going to leave and be forgotten in the same way you did not think about the people who came before you. That we're all going to be forgotten in time. And that none of us has the ability to stop life from happening in this world. That life will go on without us. And there are so many ways in which we are reminded of this in this world. Again, he says, there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. And that's just true. When we lived in Kentucky, I would drive up 41 from Evansville, Terre Haute, go that direction. I would go to Illinois to see my dad. And I recall on one of those trips up 41 that there on the side of the road is this built up area, or at least an area that had grass growing out of control, tall weeds, fenced in, and it's a cemetery. I don't know if it's still like that, but for years it was like that every time I drove by. And I don't know the story behind the situation, but it's obvious whoever had the task of caring for that piece of property, or at least that cemetery, is no longer alive or no longer doing it. And I just thought, that's just a good illustration of what Solomon's saying. I mean, obviously those people were important, right? I mean, they were important enough for somebody to put a marker with their name on it to dedicate that spot to them. And yet the time has come where there are people zipping by on 41 who don't even know these people existed, who don't even know these people's remains are there. Their name is there. Time is moving on without them. And Solomon's saying this is why it's foolish for you and I to try and live for this world and make it our God, is because the time is coming when people won't even know you were here. People won't even know your name. Even people who would be part of your family or your bloodline will not know you were here. Now, Jeff is a rare exception. Okay, here's a man who is able to research everything. Okay, that's evident. We saw that. And he almost ruined my whole sermon when he was making this point about his great-great-great-great-grandfather. Like, brother, please, man, come on. And don't ruin my point. I've got a really good point with this. But no, unless you do research, you don't know. I mean, really, look at that. I mean, you have you. If we can go back, we can get most people in our immediate family, grandparents, even great-grandparents. But after that, it gets real hazy, at least for most of us. It does for me. Let me say it like that. It gets real hazy after that. I mean, because who's his grandmother? Who's my great-great-grandfather's grandmother? Not a clue. I mean, unless you do some serious research, you can find a name. But most of us, no clue whatsoever. And it's not like, well, these people weren't important, right? No, they were important. They had lives, they had issues, they had people who cared about them. But time has gone on and they're forgotten. And you've even descended from them, and you don't even know who they are. And that's the point Solomon is making, that you have a limited space in this world and a limited time frame. So please don't think you can bow down to this world and somehow find lasting value. It cannot happen. Now, keep in mind, I don't think he's saying, and anybody, you study the book and you can see, he's not saying, okay, well, there's nothing good about life. Far from it. I mean, when you live with this perspective, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. It does teach us to live with greater values. And that's he reaches that conclusion throughout the book, that you need to be a person who appreciates your ability to work. That's a gift. That's a portion in life from God. You need to appreciate your family. And we saw evidence of that tonight with a sincere description of what that family is going through. Well, I need to think about it. I need to be mindful how family is a gift from God, and we get to enjoy this relationship only here for a limited time. And Solomon says, live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life in which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun. And I need to remember that. It's a gift to have family, and I need to be mindful of that. That is a relationship that has an expiration date. And so I need to treasure every day with my family, or my health, or my companions, or my time on earth. But just keep in mind, it's only for a little while. And that's the perspective I need to live with. And finally, I'll say this, that it's grasping for wind, according to Solomon, because we're going to leave. Expiration is certain. And not only is death certain, the diminishing aspect of life is real. He talks about that. That before you leave, if you are given long life, you're going to lose your health. Nobody gets to hold on to their health forever. It's all a temporary experience for each of us. And so he says to remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the difficult days come. And the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Yeah, you're young and strong right now, but if you stay in this world long enough, you'll lose all that stuff. Eventually, you're going to lose your health and your strength. And so you need to be a person who fears God before that day comes. And he talks about all the different changes we're going to experience. But then he says that you need to be a person who is mindful of the fact that you're going back to God to give an account for this life he has given you, that he has shared with you. And so let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And his point is this. If you want to find a life that means something, it has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with your age, your health, your gender, your race, your family. It has nothing to do with that. This is golden stuff right here. If you want to find a life that is complete and full and lasting, that makes you a person that understands what life is all about, Solomon says, I'm giving it to you right here. And this is the golden answer. Fear God and keep his commandments. If you want to find a life that is meaningful and full of purpose, you need to invest your soul and your spirit in the person who gave you life and the person you have to answer to. That's where you find life that is meaningful. And friends, he says, look, you can search for it anywhere else, but I'm telling you right now, you're going to end up in the same spot you started, empty and without meaning, if you're going to try and find something in life under the sun. It is all grasping for wind if you try to live this life without God. And so I hope that appeals to you, and I hope that's something that can be of value to you. We have invitations. Thank you. 276. And I'm glad we do this. I'm glad that we have obviously lessons like this, lectureships, but then we also close these meetings with an invitation. And it's an invitation to make things right with God, because really, again, that's all this is about. And if you're here, and I don't know who's here who's not a Christian, but if you're here and you're not a child of God, and you're ready to start over, that's the beautiful message of Christ, is you can be born again. You can start all over by His mercy, by His blood. But you have to come in contact with that blood, and you only do that by obeying the gospel. And that gospel is based on the fact that He is the Son of God, and you can know that, you can believe that, I can, because He died and He was raised from the dead. So if we're willing to confess that and turn away from sin, Acts 17 and verse 30, then be immersed in water for the forgiveness of sin. That's how we enter the body of Christ. So if you're ready to do that, all things are ready to help you.